Today, my guest is 62-year-old Bazzel Baz. You may know him best for his role on CBS's The BlackList as a member of Reddington's Mercenary team. And you may know that Baz is a former CIA intelligence special operations officer and intelligence paramilitary case officer, better known as a spy. A Citadel graduate, recipient of the Intelligence Commendation Medal, a former counter-terrorism officer in the U.S. Marine Corps, and is referred to as the Patron Saint of missing children, as founder of the Association for the Recovery of Children, better known as ARC. But most importantly, Baz is a dear friend to humanity and is a man of faith. His family's history goes back to the days of Noah. His journey on this earth is well paved, as Baz does not fear dying, but only that others will not do what they can to leave this earth a better place. I am honored to call him a friend for the past 23 years and have him in studio today. Baz, welcome to Generation Jones.
Thanks, Wendi. It's good to be here.
For your fans from the BlackList, I need to ask you this question.
Sure.
All right? And you have to be totally honest.
I'm generally
Which
always
you are.
honest.
Which you are. Okay, so you walk up to the car. You got this 4-foot lady sitting in a car. Right? Right?
You mean Susan?
You're begging
right.
her. You're begging her, you're all those things that we just mentioned. Right?
Right.
All those things in real life and in the show. You're like commander of Reddington's Mercenary Army. And yet you let this little lady pull a frickin' gun out as you open the door for her to shoot you.
I know.
Isn't it counterintuitive to your character that they created kind of, not really, because it's really you in the show? I mean, don't you think your fans are curious as to how you got off?
They probably are. When you love somebody as much as you love Susan, you'll just let her do anything. I mean, so there.
I just found it to be so, like I watched that over and over again because I just thought, that's just so stupid. You, of all people, you walk up, you open the door, please, get out of the car, get out of the car, get out of the car. I'm telling you, get out of the car. And then you get blown away.
I know. You know what? I got so much flack from the special operations community. I must have had at least 30 different special operations operators, CIA, Navy SEAL, Deltas, guys that I'd worked with downrange that called and said, "What were you thinking? You would never."
Yeah, you would never do that.
No, you would never.
I would hope you would never do that.
You know what? When they are giving you a paycheck,
yeah,
and it's television, and they have creative licensing, you do what the director tells you to do. They actually, when it had initially been written, it was something really dumber than that. Something really unbelievable that the fans would have never bought into. And I think by the good graces of Michael Watkins, who was the executive producer and director for that episode, and a very good friend of mine, he was able to carve out something that would work and almost be somewhat believable. And if you think about it, since
you trusted her.
I trusted her, and as far as the character was concerned, and we had built this great relationship over the course of 4 seasons, then it's almost believable that once she said yes, that I could have maybe had that one.
She actually
flaw.
didn't say yes, Baz. You know what
No,
she
she
said?
didn't say.
She went like this. She went, "Oh, Baz."
Yeah, she did.
Yeah.
Didn't she? and I bought into it. And then she shot me. Yeah.
And the thing is that did you really die? I mean, for your fans, did you die, or do you think maybe you could come back?
They never said necessarily in the follow-up episodes whether I died or not, which I thought was great. But I think John Bokenkamp had relayed to a number of the fans that yes, Baz is dead. But nothing was.
They didn't even give you like a funeral, or like a sad going away, or
I
nothing.
know.
Like where are the marching soldiers or all the mercenaries coming together, flying in? I could see all the helicopters flying in to come to Baz's funeral.
That would have been great. But then it would have made me a bigger character than I already was. And then Susan went and jumped off the bridge. So it was a time in the show where I think they were bleeding off characters so they could get to a point eventually where James Spader or Red Reddington, as he began in this entire role by himself, he would eventually end up by himself.
Oh. Oh, yeah. Well, I only used to watch the show just to watch you. If you weren't in the episode, it's like I didn't even know you were in the BlackList. Okay, and I'm watching the BlackList because nothing else to watch one night, and I go, oh, there's Baz, and then you're called Baz in the show.
I know. How cool was that?
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
That's great.
And then we had coffee, and you said, yeah, it was really great because I really am not that much really an actor, but as long as they have me playing myself, I'm good.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the entire process of getting on that show was a fluke.
Yeah.
I went.
You were a consultant, right?
I consulted, and I was actually doing something on another episode that Michael Watkins was shooting, and he was gracious enough to say, and he and I had worked together on other shows like CBS, The Agency, and stuff. So he had enough reliability or enough.
Faith.
Enough faith, enough faith, and trust to say, go show me how we're going to lay this out. And I did, and it initially started out where I was going to consult and teach some stuntmen how to basically take down a warehouse. And I just said, well, what if I just bring some real former CIA special operation guys in and we just do this? And
were those your guys from Arizona?
I were my guys from all over the world. I had one coming in from Afghanistan. I had another one coming from Pennsylvania. And they were all, interestingly enough, they were all coming off an assignment in various parts of the world. And I just called them up and said, hey, guys, you want to come do this? And they went, sure. So we did it. And I think about 2 weeks later, Michael called me up and said, they saw you in the editing room, and CBS wants to know if you'll come back and co-star on the show as the head of Reddington's Mercenary Army.
And that's when you said, ka-ching.
Yeah, ka-ching. I actually said, as long as I don't have to say very much.
I think that's what you told me. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, because doing dialogue and just being yourself is kind of like a mercenary guy that protects people. It's two completely different. Those are two different things. You're brought in as a consultant to kind of stage the special stunts or how people really act, right? How something would be authentic. Mm-hmm. And you did that before on other shows. But then to actually be acting is completely different.
It was, and I think one of the things I learned from a couple of really good friends of mine, I think I can call them friends, they're A-list actors, one Tim Hutton, Sam Elliott, guys like Will Patton. These are all people that I've managed to, by God's good grace, meet and befriend. All of those guys are just themselves. And they stay in their lane, so to speak.
Sam Elliott has always been like that.
Sam's amazing. Him and Catherine, they're great. And he stays in his lane. So Sam Elliott's always Sam Elliott. And so I think that somewhere in your career in this industry, at least as an actor, and I'm still not sure I can call myself that, but if you know where your lane is, then it makes it easier to just be you. And I think when you look at some really great actors, whether it's Sam or Clint Eastwood,
like Tom Cruise, ever since he did 4th of July, he never did it. I don't think he's ever done another role where he actually wasn't kind of just Tom.
Right, and he knows his thing. So I mean, if you were to ask me to do Shakespeare, I'm not so sure I would be.
Well, our next guest would be able to do that.
Well, there you have it. That's great. So I just try to be me.
Yeah.
And if
and
by
that's
chance,
enough, Baz. It's plenty for me, by the way.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Moving on, ladies and gentlemen. So and this is another fun question that I want to ask you before we start talking about ARC and your books and things like that, and then the core of why I do the podcast and having you on is about this place of being in our 60s. Do you remember the first thing you ever said to me?
Hi.
No.
No. Oh, you need to go faster. You need to go faster on the spinning bike? No, that wasn't it.
There was no spin bikes.
Oh yeah, you're right.
I know what the first words you ever said to me.
I don't remember.
You walked up to me and you said, "Good jeans." And I'm on it was on a Nautilus machine. You have to think it's 23 years ago. I was on a Nautilus machine and you walk up and you go, "Good jeans." And the one I thought was, I don't have jeans on.
Exactly.
And then we ensued from there. So anyway, yes, those were the first words. But anyway, okay. So you're an author. The other things I didn't mention in your introduction is that you are an author. Mm-hmm. You have written 3 books.
Well, my 4th now. Yeah, actually 5, actually.
Oh, okay. So I think the first one that you wrote was the Survival Hand Guide after 9/11, or
Well,
was
then
that?
that would make 6. I did the Terrorism Survival Handbook,
Right.
early,
Right.
just actually pre 9/11.
Pre
And
9/11, that's how
mhm.
I remembered it. And that's for this reason. I think I texted you once getting on an airplane not too long ago. I always think of Boz when I'm getting on an airplane because he told me back then that as long as you have a belt, after 9/11, you said as long as you have a belt, or what they don't take away from you getting on an airplane is your belt. You might have to take it off, but they don't take it away. Your belt, a laptop plug, like with a cord with the thing on the end, your laptop, and for women, we have makeup that we could actually punch somebody's eyes out with. But if you have those things, then those are weapons. You can use them to protect yourself.
You can, that's correct.
And so I always make sure, not because I don't want my pants to fall down, but I always travel with the belt or do work on the airplane, not have my laptop. No, but really, that really always helped me because I did know. That's a really good tip. Most people don't think of the things they're carrying on the airplane as something that can help them defend a situation.
Right.
And that's what was in your survival handbook. But you did you talk about your books. Talk about them.
Which one?
Anyone, name them.
You know,
What's your favorite?
I have I did Dolphins in the Sky, which was a poetic biography that's still in the making. Once that came out of print, I think I sold 100 of those, and then I just moved on to other things.
Was that relative to an LSD trip?
No, it was relative to all my travels in the agency, actually, and how that world of espionage impacted my philosophy in life. With the way I saw the world, and I think the way I saw things that were truthful, which I call ground truth, versus what people think is the truth. I think that all of us are responsible for digging in deep to know what's really true rather than necessarily what's being told to us. So I did that, and then did a number of screenplays all throughout my career that I've just held on to and been careful not to.
I couldn't list everything that you've done because you're a typical Generation Joneser, like me, like yourself. We're born 1954 to 1964. We've done a lot of people that I speak to that are our age. We've done so many things with our lives, right?
We have.
You're a screenplay writer. You're an actor. You're all of these incredibly crazy things. You also do do you still do downhill sleuthing or whatever that thing
luge?
was? Luge, yeah.
Street luge?
Yeah.
Actually, on my own, I do. Yeah.
You do?
Yeah, I take my sled out and.
You're crazy.
Go down.
You're freaking crazy. This guy's got no fear. Literally, admittedly, has no fear whatsoever. If you want to go into the deepest, darkest jungle, go with Boz. Give him a call.
Thanks, Wendi.
Well, that's who I would go with.
Oh, good.
I would not go with my husband. No. I would go with you.
All right.
All right, but we'd have to have separate tents.
Exactly. We could do that. Yeah, some of the other books, just recently I did The Narrow View, which is kind of a Shel Silverstein kind of vein.
Yes, it is. That's what it reminded me of.
Yeah, which is a great book about why...
Which is on Amazon, by the way. You can find it on Amazon.
Amazon and Google, which is a book about... It's a fast read, but it's a book about why people can be given everything in the world that they're looking for, and then they turn right around and destroy it. To go back to what they're familiar with, the habit of living a really miserable life. Did that, and So He Did is coming out. The Something Bigger Than Overthrowing Small Governments, which is the story of ARC, is coming out. Then I have a children's book series called I Love Me More. And there's another one called I Love You More.
And does it all have the illustrations with, what was his name, Patrick Dunn maybe? Or Ken Dutton?
Ken Dutton. Yep, yeah. Most of them do. Yeah, most of them do. And then I have The Spy's Guide to Dating, which we're working on now, which is hilarious.
So, and you've also done a couple, I was watching that trailer. I don't know if it was a trailer or it was actually a real show that you did, like the places you don't want to go.
Oh, places you shouldn't go.
And places you shouldn't go.
Yeah, we did a trailer, a sizzle. We were pitching that as a show, and now we're actually in the middle of turning that into a documentary.
Yeah, that was kind of super cool. Where'd you go? You went to Africa. You went to
Mogadishu, Somalia.
Mogadishu.
And I went there to go retrieve the Black Hawk that had been shot down during the very famous, the
Black Hawk
Down. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I went back there with the intention of digging that back up and getting it back to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, so it could basically memorialize.
Did you? Did you do it?
You know, it's funny. I went there and I started the process, and I won't mention any names, but a couple of people that heard that I was doing it kind of went behind my back. And as I was having them dig it up and box it up, they chose to take it themselves and take credit for it.
Okay, this is where you're reminding me of Geraldo Rivera's opening of King Tut's tomb. Do you guys remember that? It was this big thing. He was going in and he was going to open the tomb, right, of King Tut. And you don't remember this? And he opened it up and it was like empty? Geraldo Rivera, you don't remember? It's
I don't remember that.
25, 30 years ago.
I remember him.
It was so embarrassing for him
Oh, my
because they made
goodness.
this big deal out of it.
Yeah.
Finally, the opening of King Tutankhamun's tomb by Geraldo Rivera. That's probably when he switched to Fox. No, I'm kidding. That's a joke, people. I don't get political around anybody.
Well, and for this, ultimately my goal was to get it back. So even though someone underhandedly did it, guess what?
Yeah,
it got back.
which has nothing to do with what I said about Geraldo
that's
Rivera.
right.
It just kind of reminded me of, you're going to discover something and then you ended up not being able to discover it.
Well,
and do the thing that you want to do.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So.
Yeah. So was it that trip? Because in that interview that I was telling you about before the show that I read, at one point you were in Mogadishu and you went up to the roof of a building, or was that the time of Black Hawk Down, and you heard the voice of God when you said, do you remember this, or was she making that up?
Do I remember it? Yeah, I remember it.
Yeah, and I want to ask you about, before you say anything, when you were on the rooftop looking up at the African stars, and you basically said, this shit has got to stop, in my words, not Baz's, and you heard the voice tell you that it's in you, or you were the solution, or something like that. I have to ask you, do you remember what side you heard the voice from? Front, left, behind, right?
No, have you ever jumped in the ocean and been totally consumed by all of the water?
So you heard it everywhere.
Everywhere.
Because when I was going through cancer, I was laying in my bed saying, I can't do this, right? And that night, I heard the voice, and he told me I would be okay. And it was a man's voice, by the way, everyone. It was a man. But I heard it twice. I got out of bed. It was to my left. And when I've been interviewed about that by people, they typically will say, most people will say it's on the left. So I just wanted to ask you if it was on the left or if it was on the right, because if it was on the left, that would be really cool. So it was mine.
I think when it comes to things that we talk about, like God, and I don't really care what, when you have your experiences and you deal with that omnipotence, it consumes you. And
yes,
with
I know the feeling.
Kind of
yes.
It's really,
and it's a true voice. You really,
yeah, it's audible. I mean, it's audible, and and a lot of people, I don't really care. When you've experienced it, it's your experience.
Yeah.
And it's like, I've been downrange so many times. I've not only seen life and death, I've been instrumental in both of those processes.
Right. Which I was going to ask you a question about that, but I'm not going to, because.
Yeah, it's just it's something you take your grave with you. But out of all of those things, you learn that God doesn't need your belief or unbelief to exist. One thing we all do is we all journey out of here.
That's right.
And for me, and the historical references, particularly coming out of the CIA, it's interesting about being in the CIA. You are required to know, when you gather intelligence, the CIA is a unlimited vessel of information that most of the world will never know about.
Yeah.
So when you make those decisions in life, as I did, I had the best of the best agency to dig in and know what truth was. That's all the agency does. It just collects intelligence and true facts on things. And so, I had my opportunity in life to dig in religiously and go, okay, what's the truth here? And I wasn't born into a Christian faith. My grandfather was Druze. He was actually Muslim, who converted. And his conversion is quite an interesting thing as well. But after I dug in, I came to understand that the facts that I was being presented were all true. And I'm not much of a gambler. I like calculated risk, but I'm not a gambler. And so I wasn't willing to gamble with my soul. And for somebody in special operations that we were always on the edge of life and death situations, most of my guys, if not all of them, come to grips with life and death.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know of a single one that hasn't come to a realization that when they leave here, they will stand before an omnipotent God.
In whatever form that might be.
Whatever form that is
Right.
in this universe. And so for me, with that experience that you were
Yes.
leading into, it was actually during the Civil War in 1993.
It was.
It was way before. Actually, it was 3 months before the Black Hawk Down incidents to some degree. And
And is that what inspired ARC? Was when you saw the little girls in the street? And...
It was. It was on that given day. We I think you know this story. We found two little girls that were hiding underneath some debris outside of an Italian fortress, but they were dressed differently. They had blue jeans and green T-shirts and aviator sunglasses on. It was just so unusual, and that is what I wrestled with, as did some of my team when we got back to the safe house. Is like, what are these little girls doing there? And surely if somebody doesn't save them, they'll be dead within the week with all the fighting. And we also realized that the CIA would not authorize it. No one could find out if we even did it. And if we got into a jam or a firefight in the process, we were probably going to really be crucified later for this. And not to mention lives left. And it was that night that I was on top of the roof.
Yeah.
And that I told you about, and I'd never seen any more stars as I had. And I looked up and I just said, all right, God, I've seen so much destruction, and now I've got these two little girls. This is really resonating with me. Why don't you do something about this?
Mm-hmm.
And that's when
he said, you can.
He said, I did. I created you.
Yeah, I created you. Exactly.
and
no
I have
pressure,
to tell you,
by
for
the way.
people, it was
no
just
pressure.
like, no pressure. But you feel there's this weird static in the air, and it feels like it just wants to push you down. And then, of course, after that, as you know, doors opened up, miracles happened. We rescued the girls, and that was when I came back to the States and said, okay, so what happens to children here in America?
Yeah, and you created the Association for the Recovery of Children. You've been doing that for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
You basically get your team together and you go in and you help recover children from pretty much anywhere.
Pretty
right?
much.
And we touch on that real quick, and then we'll take a quick break, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about being 60.
Okay.
All right. So to tell us a little bit about ARC.
It's a 501c3 nonprofit organization of former military, intelligence, and law enforcement officers that are dedicated to the safe recovery of lost, exploited, missing American children. And once all local, state, and federal law enforcement efforts have been exhausted, we get involved at no cost to the custodial guardian, and certainly at no salary to any of our operators. It is something bigger than overthrowing small governments for us. And we have a talent, and we all pretty much agree that we wouldn't want to leave this earth without using that talent to the best of our ability. So what we do is we get a case, and we review the case to figure out, one, if the child is still alive, and two, what we can apply as far as our tradecraft and our skills to actually go in and save a child from multiple conditions: human trafficking, non-custodial parental judgment, kidnapping, whatever it may be. And so far, we've been really blessed. We have a 100% rescue rate, and every kid we've gone after, we've been able to bring home.
Yeah, it's like I remember when you left to go get Lily.
Oh my gosh, Lily's
did.
letter, that's right.
Yeah, I remember when I saw you right before you left to go get Lily, although you couldn't tell me you were going to go get Lily.
That's true.
Yeah.
She's a big girl now. I think she's out maybe
It's
in
a long time ago.
college. It was a long time ago, yeah.
So, okay, well, we're going to take a quick break, and I'll be right back with Bazzel Baz. You're listening to Generation Jones, a podcast about the new era of pro-aging and the unique challenges of life over 50. I'm your host, Wendi Cooper, and I hope you're enjoying the show. We're back. Boss, since our show is my show, and it's not your show yet, since my show is really, my podcast is really about, it's morphing into and becoming more and more a community of where people, I hope, can come and listen to interesting people, remarkable people that have shaped our world like yourself, but also a place where it builds a community of like-minded individuals that are moving into, let's call it our second half of life, right? We find this time that I'm finding that most people are finding this time in their life between, 50, 55, 60, becoming something that is, I don't want to say concerning, but I do want to say confusing. That's very confusing for a lot of people, mostly kind of coming to the realization of what's next, what now, like you said, we all meet our maker. We all end up, we don't live forever, but we all do want to leave or some of us, but most of us want to live our full purpose, have fulfillment in our soul, really accomplish what we've come into this world to accomplish. Then we work really hard to gather stuff and knowledge and wisdom and expertise and houses and cars and shoes and stuff like that. And one day maybe we do wake up and say, hey, I have all of this and I've accomplished all of this, but now what's next? So how do you feel? I met you 23 years ago, Boz. You didn't have gray hair on your head.
I know.
And now it's 23 years later. So what is changing for you? And do you feel as though you kind of are going through this, I don't want to call it a change because that sounds so menopausal, but looking ahead at a different kind of future or what lies ahead for you, and how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think for us, it's not a change as much as this. It's an extension or a continuation of life that we live every single day. For our generation, so to speak, I'm 62. And we talked a little bit about this earlier. I like to tell our generation, so to speak, to take their rightful place in the world. I think that it's too easy as you get older to get pushed aside by younger generations, so to speak, and not to create a battle or anything over that, but in our discussions with millennials, so to speak, one of the things we notice with millennials is their sense of self-entitlement. And I like to tell people our age, take your rightful place, because it is this generation and what we learned from our parents and our grandparents that actually built the platform for freedom and technology on all of those things that now people are benefiting from. And I like to tell our generation that because even though you may not know how to press the right button, even though you're not that quick on a computer, you have to be grounded in the fact and care enough about yourself to know that, guess what? We're still wise, and we're still smart, and we're still.
I have to argue a little bit of the point of we're not very good on a computer. I mean, I've been using a computer since like a IBM Selectric or a typewriter. I've been using a computer my entire adult life.
Well, that's because you're so much younger than me.
It's not like I know I'm older than you, but I think that we are technically savvy. I mean, we came from analog to digital. We've experienced all of these things. I think it's more of a soul-searching trueness and self-awareness and being able to know that, you're going to wake up one day and yes, Baz, you have 8 years to 70. I have 7 years to 70. if you can make that your mantra tomorrow morning, and then call me and tell me how you feel, because it kind of changes things a little bit. We still feel we're still young. We are still young, and I think that Generation Jonesers are still jonesing for more. Right? They're not done. They don't want to retire. They might say, well, I have millions of dollars, or I have no home. It doesn't. The effect that I'm finding that people are feeling spiritually and within themselves is, I'm not talking about somebody that's made it, has a bunch of money, or somebody that's on the street, or somebody in between. The feeling is the same, this emotional feeling of, I only have so many days, years left, and I'm realizing that, and I'm going to move into that part of my life. When you're young, you don't think about those things, right? You just don't think about it. And then there does come a point in your life where you start thinking about the limitations that are in front of you.
Well, you do. And first, let me say I stand corrected when you're talking about us not being smart with technical stuff, because I think that it might more apply to me than anybody else. But if I pull myself away, one of the things that I learned about staying young, so to speak, is there's a difference between growing old and aging. We'll all get older. We get that.
Physically
and if
older,
we
yes.
don't die along the way. But aging has a lot to do with how you think about that. My dad's 85. He still rides his bike like 20 miles 3 times a week. My mom still jogs and stuff like that. And one thing I learned from actually a good buddy of mine in OMS, Office of Medical Services in the CIA, was how to slow down the aging process. And it started with something really simple. He said,
stop thinking you're old.
Well, he said, quit celebrating your birthdays. Because he said, look, birthdays are synonymous with getting older.
Yeah.
Older is synonymous with aging.
Yeah.
Aging is synonymous with I can't do this, as we're programmed in our society. Yeah. And I noticed when my grandmother, when she was in her 90s, you would ask her, you'd go, so Grandma, how old are you? And she'd go, I don't know. And yet her life was still so full. So I think for us, it's never about getting from point A to point B. I'm born and I'm going to die. It's about what I do between those 2 points when things go upside down, and what are my emergency procedures. So if you plan on a good life and you're smart enough and you're healthy and you do those things, then you live life that way mentally and you stay young. There's nothing in the rule book that says, I'm 62 and I can't be on a skateboard. I do that on the Strand all the time.
I know you do.
Nothing that says I can't surf, can't skydive. If you don't put your limitations in place, then they oftentimes don't exist. And
do you think it has you have this thing where you don't fear dying, right? And it's written somewhere. I read.
No, I haven't been given a fear of spirit, and because I'm not going to die.
Right, exactly. I'm the same way. I don't fear dying. I actually envy people sometimes when they die, because I want so much to know what it's like the next place. I'm serious, people. I'm a little weird on that. But when someone dies, regardless of how they die,
right.
I just know that where they've gone is so beautiful that I am a little envious. I know, I'm weird.
Well, we're weird with you then, because that's... Out of all the life and death I've seen, and trust me, I've seen
a lot,
probably more death than I have life.
Yeah.
I am convinced in the deepest parts of my soul that we are such amazing creations that life is eternal. It may not be in this form,
right?
But it is, or at least it is for me. Now, the rest of the world may not think that, but guess what? I don't care what the rest of the world thinks.
Well, you know what? That is a symptom of what everybody's saying to me is, once you get to a certain age, you really don't care what anybody thinks. It's like, if not now, when? And I don't really care what anybody thinks, because, I'm never going to be, like super fit and the model and the this and the gorgeous and looking at the magazine pictures and thinking, oh, I want to look like that. No, I kind of came to the realization that I am what I am, and I really don't care what anybody else thinks about it. So,
Well, and also one of the things we know when people get a little bit older, they somehow need purpose or want purpose.
Well, we all have a purpose.
We have a purpose. And you know what, Wendi? I used to think that way, but here's how I've changed my thinking. I used to think that I was sent here for a special purpose. Mm-hmm. What I realized is, or a special plan, right, for my life. And what I've realized is I've got so much gratitude for the fact that I'm more a part of God's great plan. And I'm a part of that, which is great. So however that wants to play out, if every day I give 100% of who I am, then I'm okay with that.
And you're not going to worry about what your purpose is.
I don't worry about it because, in my life, we go down range and a lot of us, especially a lot of older special operations guys, when you're sitting on the battlefield and you have a 22-year-old who's dead, or a 25-year-old or a 30-year-old, and after many years that you've been through very similar experiences, you ask yourself, why them and why am I still here? And so you get a sense that you're not really going anywhere until
you've served your quote unquote purpose.
Yeah.
Right.
So to speak.
Yeah, so many people spend so much time seeking their purpose, right? They're seeking it. I got to find my purpose. What is my purpose? Well, I said to somebody one day, I said, well, why do you have to why not that you have to have a purpose, but why do you have to know now what your purpose is, right? It's like if you knew now what your purpose was, then you've completed your purpose, right? So you're kind of not, as long as you're striving, even mentally, to find your purpose and to achieve this purpose that nobody seems to exactly say. It's like I say, my podcast is my purpose. I've been led here to create a community of like-minded people to talk about things. And this is kind of, I feel in my heart, in my soul, deep in here, once I've found this topic and now building the community, this is kind of like my purpose.
Yeah.
But I got to tell everybody, I'm going to live another 25 years, so that is going to change a few times.
Exactly.
But, we'll see. But it's, but that's a lot of the conversation that actually is going on, is people just want to know, why am I here? Why am I here? What is the reason? And how can I fulfill that? And I think you don't fulfill it. You don't do that. You just feel it when you've done it.
Right.
Is what I'm trying to say, is you feel it when you've found it.
Well, a lot of people, essentially, when I take people on trips into the bush, I will say, you can never be lost. And they will go, what do you mean you can never be lost? I feel like I'm lost right now. It's like, no, you're not lost. Right. You know exactly where you are. You're right here.
Yeah.
And if you'll stop and look at where you are right here in life, and instead of seeking so much, paint the picture of who you are. Oftentimes we look so far ahead of who we are that we get discouraged. And so I generally like to tell people, look, just be the leader that you're supposed to be, because in leadership, great leaders are first great servants. And when you become a great servant, you serve society, you unselfishly want to help out where you can. And interesting enough, guess what? You find great purpose. Because that is really what good leadership is all about. So I encourage people to be great leaders. And if you do that, you're never, ever going to have you're never going to get into a point in life where you don't have enough to do. Because we live in such a time where there's so much instant gratification, I think people jump on the bandwagon when they get a coined term like change. Well, change doesn't necessarily mean it's good. And there are a lot of things that work fine that don't need changing. And I think that what's going to happen and it's always been this way. Look at the American Revolution. It was only a few people that jumped on board to give us the freedom that we have right now. It wasn't every colonist. Well, in the generations to come, no matter how bad they may be handling things with selfishness, self-entitlement, all that may be, there will come out of, like the phoenix from the fire, there will come enough good people that will lock on to wisdom. And they will be smart enough to look at the people who came before them and learn from them so that they become great leaders. But one thing we stand on, at least in our country, and I love this, is that we the people.
Right.
And that's how we were founded, and that requires the people to do what they need to do in whatever manner they need to do it.
Right.
To continue to preserve our Constitution, our Declaration, so that we can maintain the freedom that we have and to do what we do in this country, which no other country in the world does.
Yeah, if you've ever had a chance to go outside the United States into a place, and many of the places that you've been, you get a real wake-up call on what life is really like. I wish we had more time.
I wish we did too.
Probably would have. Anyway, due to technical difficulties. But let me check my notes. Is there anything that you have? You have stuff coming up. What are you doing? If you want to see more about Baz, it's bazzelbaz.com, right?
Yeah, Bazzel-Baz.com is the actor's website. I have lifecoachbaz.com.
Oh, your life coach. I wanted to talk a little bit about, because you are doing life coaching, but you have a very specialty technique in your life coaching, right?
I do. We perfected a trauma clearing method about a year ago. Actually, a good buddy of mine who passed away, Rick Lombard, and we have about a 98% success rate with it, with PTSD and other stuff, and it's kind of pissing a lot of psychologists off.
Yeah.
Because we didn't bring it about as a moneymaker, number one, but number two, it works.
Right. Right.
You know?
Which is no better guy to get you out of your PTSD mood than you.
Well, thank
That's
you.
a little bit of a joke, but it's true. I mean, I am a sufferer of PTSD in several
Yeah, we all
different
have
ways.
some trauma that happens every now and then. But I'm thankful for the first time, and we sought this out for years, maybe 20 years, looking for what would work, and we kind of feel like it was given to us.
And
we're
people
grateful.
can find that at
lifecoachbaz.com.
Life Coach Baz, and that's B-A-Z if you don't know. So there's Bazzel Baz _ That's you with your name.
Yeah,
Bazzel-Baz.com,
Bazzel-Baz.com, and then there's Association for the Recovery of Children.org.
That's right, where you can donate, and you can read more about it, or if you know of anybody that is looking to find someone, go there. And if you've exhausted all other methods, which is really cool. Well, Baz,
Thanks,
Bazzel
Wendi.
Baz, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
It was great. Thanks. Well, that's a wrap for this week's episode. You can find us everywhere you download your podcasts, and when you do, please leave us a review. If you have a topic or a guest you'd like to suggest, go to generationjonespodcast.com and send me an email. Make sure to follow us on social media at Jen Joneser or at C-Spot Talk. Generation Jones was produced by C-Spot Run Productions, editing and music by Orsi Digital Media, and a special thanks to Ari Morel for her help each week. See you next week, and thanks for listening.